Hello and welcome to Lamplighter. Today is September 21. Today in our daily Bible readings, we go back to the life of Daniel. Remember, Daniel is one of the exiles who was taken into Babylonian captivity, and he has a number of very fascinating, interesting experiences while he is there. Today's reading is no exception to that. Now the king, instead of Nebuchadnezzar, is Belshazzar. Now, Belshazzar, we're going to see in today's reading, is quite an arrogant king who likes to put himself on display, and he's going to certainly be taken down a notch in today's reading. So we begin the reading with seeing that King Belshazzar gave a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles and drank wine with them. While Belshazzar was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. And as they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold and silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Well, you can imagine this does not sit well with God. Not only is he drinking from goblets taken from the temple in Jerusalem, but he's also arrogantly giving credence to and glory to false gods in words of idolatry. So we read on that suddenly the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote. His face turned pale, and he was so frightened that his knees knocked together and his legs gave way. Can you imagine? As he's drinking and having this feast and basking in his own arrogance, he looks up and he sees this human hand writing an inscription on the wall. Well, it stuns him, it frightens him, and so he calls in all the magicians and all the diviners and the wise people of his day and asks them to read to him what has been written on the wall and to explain it to him. Well, no matter how wise these men are, they are not able to read and interpret the message that's on the wall. Then the king is reminded about Daniel, that Daniel has this way of God about him, that Daniel has been the one in the past that has been successfully interpreting dreams, so maybe this man of God, Daniel, could be the one to call on. So the king calls on Daniel, and Daniel then answers the king. You can keep your gifts for yourself. You see, the king had promised him great riches and gifts if he could possibly interpret the handwriting on the wall. Daniel says you can keep all of those things for yourself. Give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means. O king, the most high God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. Because of the high position he gave him, all the peoples and nations and men of every language dreaded and feared him. But when his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was deposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven away from people and given the mind of an animal. He lived with the wild donkeys and ate grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven until he acknowledged that the Most High God is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and sets over them anyone he wishes. Daniel is simply reminding Belshazzar that his father went through a period of temporary insanity at the hand of God, because God was showing him who was in control. Nebuchadnezzar, as we in the South might say, got a little bit too big for his britches. He became quite arrogant, and so God takes him down a notch. Now Daniel is saying, look, Belshazzar, can't you learn? The same thing is happening here. You're arrogantly having this feast and drinking this wine from the goblets that were taken from the temple in Jerusalem. You're worshiping false gods. God is trying to get your attention. But you, his son, he says, O Belshazzar, you've not humbled yourself, though you knew all this. Instead, you've set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines drank wine from them. You praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or understand, but you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. So that was all sort of a precursor to the interpretation of the handwriting on the wall. The handwriting on the wall basically says, God has numbered your days. Your days are very short. He's going to say he put you on the scales and found your life to be lacking. He also is going to say your kingdom is about to be divided and handed over to the Medes and Persians. And we will see historically that all of these prophecies come true. As a matter of fact, Belshazzar dies that very night. And the kingdom is then going to be taken over by the Medes and Persians. We also read in today's reading a section entitled The 77s, and this gets very complicated because it once again is some apocalyptic language. It begins with Daniel in the first year of Darius, son of Xerxes, understanding from the scriptures, according to the word of the Lord given to Jeremiah the prophet, that the desolation of Jerusalem would last 70 years. So you remember when we were reading about the exile and God's promise that his people were going to be taken into exile because of their rebellion and sin, he told them specifically it would last 70 years. Well, Daniel reads that and he begins to be interested in that, and then it forces him, or I guess you could say inspires him, to pray on behalf of his people. He prays this great prayer. He says things like this, "Oh, great and awesome God, who keeps the covenant of love with all who love him and obey his commands, we have sinned and done wrong." He says, "Lord, you are righteous, but this day we are covered with shame, the men of Judah and the people of Jerusalem and all Israel, both near and far, in all the countries where you've scattered us because of our unfaithfulness to you. The curses and the sworn judgments written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, have been poured out on us because we've sinned against you." And then he goes on to say, "Now, O Lord our God, who brought your people out of Egypt with a mighty hand, who made for yourself a name that endures to this day, we have sinned, we have done wrong. O Lord, in keeping with all your righteous acts, turn away your anger. Turn away your wrath from Jerusalem, your city, your holy hill. Our sins and the iniquities of our fathers have made Jerusalem and your people an object of scorn to all those around us. Now, O God, hear the prayers and petitions of your servant. For your sake, O Lord, look with favor on your desolate sanctuary. Give ear, O God, and hear. Open your eyes and see the desolation of the city that bears your name. We do not make requests of you because we are righteous, but because of your great mercy, O Lord. Listen, O Lord, forgive. O Lord, hear and act. For your sake, O God, do not delay, because your city and your people bear your name." I love this expression where he says, we're not making requests because we're righteous, but because of your great mercy. That's still true today, isn't it? So then we read on, and Daniel is going to be sent the angel Gabriel to tell him about these 77s. Gabriel is bringing this message about the 77s, and there is general consensus that each 7 represents a week of years, that is 7 years. From that point forward, there has been much discussion about the meaning of this text. Some would say the first 7 sevens, or 49 years, may well have reference to the time it will take to rebuild the city of Jerusalem, but the particular decree setting that time period into motion is much debated. The second set of 7s, or the 62 sevens, may be referring to the coming of the Messiah. And then many are saying that the final week, or the last 7 years, has also special meaning, and all agree, no matter what the discussion is, that God is working purposely in history on the behalf of his righteous ones. What the 77s means is not really what we can even identify, even as modern day readers. What we do know is God is communicating to Daniel that the 70 years he has promised his people will be in exile is being fulfilled, and it is symbolic of the way God is working among his people, how God has a promise and a plan that involves the coming of a Messiah, and that Messiah will ultimately come and rule in a kingdom that will never come to an end. There is much to be discussed. There are all kinds of opinions about what the 77s means, but the point we need to remember as we take a giant step backwards, our God is in control all the time. Isn't it great to be a lamplighter? His word is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. I hope you have a blessed day.